And now, part two of our concerns for the parenting plan mediation. Welcome to the Pro Se Divorce Podcast, where you can learn how to turn mediocre mediations into major successes. My name is Tom Davis, and I'm a certified professional divorce mediator in Denver, Colorado. I've helped thousands of clients over the past 2 decades reach success rates and outcomes that are significantly higher than what is typical. In each episode, I will share valuable insights, practical skills, and tools you can utilize right away to improve your mediation outcomes. And I'll serve as your guide through the potentially confusing process of divorce. Better days are coming, starting now. So before you can get through a divorce with children, both of you will have to attend, at least here in Colorado, a parenting after divorce class. And so let's talk about that. So let's start with what's covered in the class, what the class is, and I guess what it's not. So what it is not is a parenting class. What it is a class to teach you how to protect your kids from the negative impacts of divorce class. So how your behavior impacts the kids, how to protect them from conflict, how to identify and protect their needs being separate from yours, and how to deal with conflict and communication and all those things. And so a long time ago, the state courts were dealing with a lot of, troubled young people committing crimes, and they were wondering why there's so many children in the court system. And they looked at a bunch of the cases and said, well, a lot of them come from divorced homes. And so they looked into it and saw conflict in the homes and thought, I wonder if that is one of the reasons for this. And they determined that it was. And so they put the class together and instituted it as a legal requirement to take the class. And then they saw a dramatic reduction in, kids winding up in the court system from it. And so it's documented to be effective and work. So what the class contains is more theoretical, like conceptual, philosophical, and pragmatic skills and tools to help you get through things. But what it is not is a class to teach you how to adopt that to a parenting plan. It's basically here's what you need to know, and then do your parenting plan. And what is difficult for people is to apply what they've learned conceptually so quickly into a plan when they don't have any real prior experience with, getting all the way through. So one of life's challenges or problems is that while you're going through something, building up the wisdom, by the time you get the wisdom, it's too late to apply it because you had to learn going through it, and then it's too late to apply it. So what you need to do is try to get as much wisdom and borrow from other people as much as possible while you're going through it, so that you don't have that gap in your parenting, because it's avoidable, right? And this class is there to help fill that gap. And so a lot of what's in the class is going to be, communication, seeing things from the kid's perspective, and basically trying to get you into the right mindset for co-parenting, having good expectations around it, and getting you in the right place of what parenting style are you going to have, because there's traditionally 3 main types of parenting approaches or styles that people fall into, they fall into. So basically, there is collaborative or cooperative parents. These are parents who get along really easily with each other. It's easy for them to do, and there's not a lot of problems. Kids that come from these types of parenting approaches, big surprise, they do well. Then there's conflictive parents who seem to argue about things that don't even really warrant an argument, but they do anyway. And so kids that come out of these environments typically don't do as well. And the way I look at it is there's a little mom and dad inside the kid. And so the kid needs to have their source where they came from, their mom and dad. They need to feel that source is good, right? And that source is in harmony. And then they can go about developing with that foundational need met. And it is a very strong and powerful one. Kids that are adopted, and 75, I think 75% of them at some point go seek out their birth parents, even if they've had a wonderful life and had a great experience and are doing really well. It's this instinctual itch, this instinctual need to know, where did I come from? What is that source? And it is down at that level, and it needs to be. There's just a natural relationship with it, and so they go seek out and see what the situation was. And so it is that powerful, and young kids can't articulate this to parents, and so it can turn into a situation where the kids don't know how to articulate their needs, and parents don't understand them, and so we have a lot of missed opportunities with that. And so the little mom and dad inside, they need to be okay. And this gets into parent bashing. You don't want to, when the kids hear one parent bash the other, it's like you're basically criticizing half of the child at that point. If you can think of it that way, if that helps you, that gives you an idea of what it's like to be the kid. And so that's not good. And if the little mom and dad is in conflict, then that's not good either, because two people that love this child are in conflict, and the kid's seeing both people hurting. And particularly if they think it's their topics they're fighting about are about the kids just naturally internalize them and say, well, they're fighting about me, so it's my fault, and then they internalize that, and that's not good. So that's why the conflict is so bad, is that it can't be managed. You can't ever produce just enough conflict or manage how much kids take in. So it's not something you want to play with. And so that's what's covered in the class. It's sort of those things. They don't talk about, who's going to get the kids Thursday at 6, or if medical should be, a mutual decision or not, or even that's how that's done. And so this becomes a big gap for parties who go to the class and then wind up in a mediation and say, well, I don't know how to apply what I've learned. So to address that need, I'm working on a pre-mediation parenting class that helps bridge those two things. And I do it organically because I've taught the classes and I do the mediations. And so I know how to translate those things quite effectively. But many times the people putting on the class don't understand the legality of, the structure and long-term outcomes of how you document a parenting plan are. And then people who write parenting plans may not be very well versed in the psychology of, divorce adjustment. And so you have a gap there as a parent where you don't really have any way to effectively bridge those two. Because I've worked in both worlds, I naturally bridge that. But it's not an assumption that should be made. You should assess your mediator and if they are up to speed with that or not, and or the material you're getting from the class. So anyway, I'm putting a class together on how to bridge those two. I don't have it out yet, but you can, in the meantime, utilize pre-mediation coaching with your mediator to help with taking those concepts and thinking, how would this be applied to a parenting plan scenario, so that you come in prepared for those topics at the time. Should you take the class before you do the mediation? In general, I will say yes, because of what I just said about, maybe the mediator doesn't really understand the divorce adjustment and child psychology, and so you may want to get some of that under your belt before you head into the mediation, so you're a little bit more prepared. But again, there is no way to effectively, at least in all the classes I've seen, bridge the class topics into a parenting plan, mode. And so there is a challenge there, but all things considered, you're better off taking the class first. That's just in general, but if you are saying things, even in your own head, like, well, between the two of us, I am more organized, I'm more plugged in, I've traditionally been there more, I've been the primary caregiver, let's say. I am the one who makes sure that bedtimes are done, teeth are brushed, nutrition's met, homework is done. The other parent, not so much. So again, kid's best interest being the standard, kid is better off with that type of parent. Therefore, they're better off with more time with me. Therefore, I should have more parenting time because it's in kid's best interest. If you are thinking that way, you should take the class first before you even attempt to get into the mediation. And because this concept of what is in a kid's best interest is first has to be properly identified and defined before it can be used as a standard. And most people don't do that. They just take their native, default understanding and apply that. And it just so happens that they're a better parent. And so ergo, I need to have more parenting time. And that is not necessarily what is in the kid's best interest. You need to look at it from what is in the kid's best interest from their point of view. And what is in their best interest is to have an open, loving relationship with both of their parents, to not have conflict in their parents, to not have one parent bashing the other parent, because everything in the kids' world is based on that little mom and dad inside. And if that is in turmoil, then it doesn't matter what greater lessons you're trying to bestow or instill in your children. They're distracted. It's in the shadow of this conflict, and so you're not going to get the full measure of the benefit of those lessons, because you've said, I want to teach you some great stuff, but I'm going to tie one hand behind your back now. So how effective is that going to be? It's just going to be frustrating, and they're not going to get the full measure of what you're trying to teach them. So you might then, if you understand that it's in kids' best interest to have open, loving relationship with both parents, the trick becomes not to equate time and overnights with effectiveness as a parent. And I've said this prior, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So it's not about the overnights you have, it's about how you use the overnights you have. And so if you, for example, the way I look at this is think of you and your co-parent in a three-legged race, if you remember what those are. You're racing down the field together, and you're, one set of, ankles are tied together with a strap or a band, and you have to run together and get to the finish line. And so that awkward race is you and your co-parent, and that band around your feet tying you together is your kid. And so in order to win this, and by win, I mean, get through the divorce, get the kids developed past school and get them out in the world in a healthy way. If that's your standard, it doesn't matter when you cross the finish line. It doesn't matter if you're ahead or behind other parents, because the race isn't with other parents. It's really about getting across that finish line with your kid intact. And if you think about things from a singular, personal, independent perspective, you may think, well, I'm the better parent. And that's the equivalent of you saying, well, I don't need to sit around here and, run slower for your behalf. I'm going to run ahead because I'm a better parent. And then you take off, break the band that is your child, and you race to the finish line and say, see, I know better. I know more. But it doesn't matter, because now your kid's laying broken back there in the field and never made it to the finish line. So you need to redefine what is success and what is a kid's need before you start arguing for more overnights and start to equate those things with child's best interest, because you could inadvertently be putting a plan together that is not in your kid's best interest under the guise of kid's best interest. So what your challenge becomes then is to say, well, what is the speed at which we can go together? And then that's your plan. And then anything else you have on that's in addition to that, be smart and strategic in how you instill those values with your kid. And that can quite simply just be in the modeling that you do. It may not require a lot of complicated, manipulation. For the most part, kids are going to be you. So if you are hardworking, honest, and creative and funny, there's a good chance your kids are going to soak up a lot of that sunshine on the way. And so you might find that very comforting. If the thought of your kids turning out just like you alarms you, and to some it does, then that tells you you've got some work to do, because your kids are going to turn out just like you. So if you improve yourself and do well, recover and adjust, and live the life you want them to have, the chances of them having that go, up and very, very highly. And so it may not be as hard as you think. There's just a lot of pressure and there's a lot of fear and anxiety around it, especially if the kids are younger. It's hard to be more liberal with these considerations when you have a 3-year-old versus a 13-year-old. And just recognize that's normal. But remember also that your ultimate objective as a parent is to produce a well-adjusted, independent little human being. And so to do that, they need to be able to go address problems and deal with life. And that might start with modeling it, doing it in a safe environment, like with a co-parent versus the world at large. And so looking at things strategically as that parent and helping teach kids and develop them and instill values in them with the time you have becomes the challenge, instead of forcing the other parent to step up to your level because maybe they're not just able to do that. And so now you're actually creating conflict by having expectations of the other parent that aren't realistic. And that's like the equivalent of you dragging them down the field on the 3-legged race. It's just not going to work. And you end up creating conflict, which overshadows all the good things you could be modeling and showing your children. So this is the mindset that is difficult to get into at this point. But this is the opportunity. And so the class is an attempt to do that, but also the working with a mediator to help get yourself organized and oriented in the right fashion to get the most out of your experience is also very helpful. In the class itself, they're going to have, some exercises, and they're going to have some things to help you invest in your parenting approach for the benefit of your kids. And I think you're going to find it really helpful. It was the most important thing that I did in the whole divorce, and it may be the most important thing that you do. Because the children are the only non-renewable resource in this whole thing, and they're the ones who had no control over it. And so there's things in there that you can do to implement right away, because I think we all know if you go learn something and don't apply it or make it a part of your routine or incorporate it or follow up with it, it doesn't make it to long-term memory. And 4 months down the road, you just fall back into your patterns, and the class didn't really do much for you. And you lose all that opportunity that is so valuable. So when you take the class, my advice is implement things right away. Don't wait and think you'll get to it next week or after the divorce. Do it right away. Like, for example, one of the things we did in our class was the parent's promise. And it's a list of things that you promise for your kid. Like, I promise that I won't involve you in the divorce. I won't pull you in the middle of it. I promise to always listen to you. I promise to, I don't know. I mean, there's a ton of things. So print that out, sign it, commit to it, and then tape that to the inside of their closet door. So, so when they open up the door, they look at it, and you never know. They might come to you one day with the form in their hand, 6 months, 9 months down the road, and say, hey, number 4. And you look at the form, and number 4 says that you agree not to argue in front of your kid. And your kids say, yeah, I hear you doing that. And you said you wouldn't do that. And I'm going to pretty much bet that if that was going on, you'd want to know about it so you could stop doing it. And because you did this exercise, your kid may come to you and say, you promised you wouldn't do it. And you said if I didn't do these things to let you know. So I'm letting you know. And now you can say, okay, I didn't realize you could hear that. I won't do that anymore. Thank you for telling me. And you make the rule more important than you, which puts credence in that. And the kid can believe in that now that's the right thing to do. So these are little things, but if you implement them right away, you have a better chance of capturing value, going forward. So do that. So anyway, those are some things to help you get more out of the class. If you are not already in the right mindset and you're kind of thinking from a singular perspective or with such confidence that I know my kids, maybe you should take this class because, it's not intuitive. The kind of thinking that you're going to learn in the class is not intuitive at all. And you should probably get up to speed so you can have the right plan in place, because I just see so many parents go into it with that I'm a better parent perspective, and things just fall apart later. Sometimes really tragically, honestly, because they think that's the essence of what it takes to be a good parent, and they just totally discount the cost of the conflict in the overall evaluation of their extra value as a better parent. They don't then detract, they don't add in the added cost of the conflict in that equation. And so it looks like on paper there's no downside when in fact there's a lot of downside. And so not understanding that dynamic can be a shocking realization down the road. And again, it's too late, right? Kids are 12, 13 now, and you're having problems, let's say, that stem from all this, and you can't go back. So you've got to not have an ego heading into this and really try to understand separately what the kids' needs are. And then how are you and your co-parent going to work together to meet those needs? That becomes the essence of your parenting plan, relationship, and agreement. Okay, so that's the class. And let's talk about the how to prepare for the mediation. So in the mediation, you're going to be trying to reduce all this complex, nuanced, amazing stuff into basically two categories: decision-making and time, which becomes a real challenge. So the physical conversations are going to hinge around who gets to make medical decisions, what about sports, how are you going to split the fees, things like that. And you're basically trying to assign legal authority and responsibility to the decision-making process for co-parenting, because you're in separate homes now. And so you have to have some kind of guideline and where the authority is so that you keep things straight. And so at its highest level, with decisions, some decisions are going to be what they call day-to-day, meaning when the kids are with you, you have full authority to make that decision, whatever it is. That might be bedtimes, allowances, hairstyles, things like that. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't coordinate together. In fact, like I famously say, the best thing you can do is put together a comprehensive parenting plan and then not look at it and just work together on everything, whether it's a day-to-day or mutual decision, providing that it's beneficial, it's helpful, it's effective. Then just do that. Become problem solvers. Don't become legalistic about the interpretation and performance of the parenting plan. However, if things do go sideways in the future, you're going to want to think of your parenting plan as, let's say things are going terribly sideways in the future, and I open up the parenting plan and I need it to say something. What should it say in that moment? That's the mindset in which you create your parenting plan. So while you hope for the best, you need to plan for the worst. And that can be really challenging. You're simultaneously going in two different directions in the mediation, and so it can be really confusing. But you need to not think about, well, we always get along, so day to day, or we always get along, so mutual. That's not the criteria for whether it should be mutual or day to day. It should be, if this situation, like let's say hairstyles, if we get really far apart and someone just does crazy things with the kid's hair, is it something I want to go to court for? Is it life-threatening? Is it something I really want to die on that hill for? And maybe no. So, okay, day to day. There are situations that come up, like let's say, I don't know, well, one of them is reproductive education or birth control. And so the thought there is like, well, we're always going to, let's just make that day to day because we both agree on that. And so the issue may be, what if there's a method of birth control that you don't agree with, like you don't agree with the shot, or you don't agree with there's a surgical method at that time, or the other parent is saying no birth control whatsoever, which actually is a pretty common mediation topic that I get into with couples. One will say abstaining is the birth control method, and the other one says, no, we need to put on birth control. And so you get into the situation where you don't agree, and then the kid's going to come to one parent and say, well, typically, stereotypically, you'd have a daughter go to a mom and say, look, stuff's going on, and don't tell dad. Or son may come to father and say, look, stuff's going on, and don't tell mom. And then you find yourself having these allegiances to your children and not to each other as co-parents. And then problems can occur where one parent is saying, I agree they shouldn't have any birth control. And the other parent says, whoa, wait a minute. I think they're sexually active. This is dangerous. And so if that's the situation and your co-parent is acting in a way that you don't, think is healthy, in that moment, do you need to have legal decision-making authority? Then that needs to be a mutual decision. If you're thinking, well, that topic, okay, well, whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to go to court over it, or it's not the end of the world. Then you're okay making it day to day. So that's just one way to look at how to assign the responsibilities for those decision types. But when I go through it, I create a decision-making guideline, which basically is, here's a list of all the topics parents could disagree or agree on that help define their overall, guideline for how they're going to participate in the legal responsibilities and their obligations to make these different decisions. So it's really clear for them. Some people say, well, yeah, recreational vehicle usage absolutely has to be mutual, where others say absolutely, day to day. And so you're going to be doing that, right? You're going to go through these decision topics. Now, when you're thinking about these, it's not just one or the other, day to day or mutual. You can have some refining, clarifying stuff in there that either take into account specific activities, time frames, or sub activities within the greater topic. So medical, let's do that as an example. So in general, non-urgent medical, you might say, well, because in that topic, there could be medications, there could be elective surgeries, there could be all kinds of really important things. Let's make that mutual. And then, but we don't want to have to call each other every time there's a cold and flu checkup or sports physical or something like that. We don't want to have to call each other because it gets tedious, because technically taking Tylenol or something like that is a medical decision. So you can, in the parenting plan, say mutual, and then say, however, or further, in addition, the parties agree that either party can make this decision when the children are with them, providing A, it is cold and flu, B, it's a sports physical or annual checkup, D, it's a regular checkup or cleaning with the dentist, C, so forth, so on, and make the list of the things that you already pre-agree either of you can do, and then put that in there. And then therefore, when you go forward, as long as you're doing one of those activities, you both have the full legal authority to go execute that without having to call each other. And if it's anything else, you must get together. So you can start to refine those things. You can only do that with mutual decisions. If you select day to day, you're basically saying either parent has full authority. So if you want to preserve any legal decision making in that topic in the future, if things go sideways, you need to think about mutual, and you can put refining language in there. Another one that I do is for discipline and minor correction and discipline. What's typical for most parties is to say make it day to day. However, if the either parent has a significant concern, or the discipline is going to span parenting time exchanges, so like no phone for 2 weeks or something like that, then it reverts to mutual, and both parties must come together and pre-agree to that before they implement it with the kid. Otherwise, go ahead and handle the situation on your own. So there's some refinement that can be done. Another one that we do is can be time specific. So that might be, let's say, firearms, firearm usage, children's use of firearms, or training in the use of firearms. So you might say, got a 4-year-old, so clearly we want to be more conservative, let's say, in our in protecting the kid and being more involved in those decisions. So we could say up till 12 years old, it's mutual, but everything is mutual. After 12, you might say, I'm okay if one of the parents wants to introduce the children to long guns or rifles, target shooting, that kind of thing. So that can be okay and pre-authorized and basically a day-to-day decision. But let's say no handgun usage unless by mutual agreement. So you can specify time. So it's mutual up to this age, and then it's day to day. You can combine that with sub activities. So pistol versus rifle, let's say, or recreational vehicle usage. It might be, they need to wear, it could be day to day, but the kids need to have proper safety gear. One of the parents needs to be engaged in supervising in the activity. 3, it can't be a 4-wheeler. So you can plus and minus conditions in that refinement. And you can also make that the condition until the age of 14. And then you could say, now it just reverts to full day to day. So all those are ways to refine your decision making, so it's not just one or the other. And again, that gets into values. It gets into what you're naturally going to be able to collaborate with and work together with without conflict. And so that becomes real tailored to your specific family. One of the temptations I see is, especially from that parent who's got more specific intentions or expectations, is to make things mutual because they feel like they have a sense of control in the other person's household. So yeah, let's make screen time and hairstyles mutual. Let's make everything mutual. And that's their way of saying, I'm going to have some influence in the other person's home. And that is better for kids. Okay. I can see the straight line and the logic there, but that you're getting divorced, another person is going to do things differently than you are. And if they're not naturally going to be able to execute those things, which is why, some people want the mutual decision making in the first place, then they're not going to be a good executioner, implementer of your ideas. And it may form resentment and it may create conflict. And again, any benefits you get from feeling like you have influence in that home are overshadowed by the conflict that presence has. So you basically want to try to find where you're going to organically and naturally align, document that, and then address anything that's going to be significant for kid, like medical decisions, school choice, things like that. You may say those are mutual, and I don't care how difficult it is for us to talk and work it out. Those warrant that level of conversation, and then make those mutual. And it's going to be different for everybody. Knowing your parenting style is important in that process of determining the decision making. So again, those are collaborative, cooperative parents. They naturally get along, so a lot of mutual decisions good for them. You could be conflictive, meaning you pretty much argue about anything anyway. So having more mutual, you might think it's a solution to that, but it actually can be more conflictive because you're not agreeing anyway. Now you formalize that you're going to disagree on everything, and that could be bad. And so then if you're not naturally collaborative or cooperative, then you have to, and you want to try to avoid the conflictive style, you can move into what we call parallel parenting, which is you figure out where you can agree, document that, everything else becomes day to day, except for that measure of things that are life-threatening, or safety, a level of safety, then make those mutual. Everything else, make it day to day, and just learn to let go. The other person's going to not cook nutritious meals. They're not going to manage screen time effectively, but they're not going to anyway. And you're divorced. You have no control over that other household. So on top of not having any control, adding conflict on top of that does not make it better. And this is one of the really difficult things as parents heading into the mediation or creation of a parenting plan don't quite yet understand the value of. And so thinking through these things with regard to decision making being reflective of your parenting style, your values, the natural ability of the parents to get along and not feel like they're being told you have to hit this high standard because it's in kids' best interest because that's the standard you're at, that can lead to conflict, and conflict bad. So schedules is another thing to maybe examine before you come in, because that's going to obviously tie into parenting time. And so the thing here is to look at your work schedules, look at your lifestyle, and put together, what I'd call the 80% situation. So what's going to happen 80% of the time? So let's say most of the time you're going to be able to handle a certain schedule, but you have work travel, or you have conferences, or you have to do, you're in the reserve or guard or something like that. And there's going to be some element that doesn't work in that normal regular schedule. As long as it's only happening 10, 20% of the time, it makes sense to create the regular schedule and then think about how we're going to handle, those deviations when they occur. So we can have a policy in place around when it does deviate from the normal schedule, how we're going to handle travel and all that. And that might be better than trying to come up with a single strategy that handles all the permutations and deviations possible. So to simplify it that way. So the schedule of your availability should be the baseline for your parenting time. So because you have to be present as a parent. So if you're going to be working, long hours and travel, most of the time, it doesn't make sense to have a 50-50 parenting plan because you're not actually even present for your parenting time. And so looking at when you are present and that being the baseline for your parenting time, that's a good starting place. And I know it's tough, especially if you're the parent who's looking like you're too busy to have a 50-50 plan. But again, it really honestly is about quality and not quantity. So it is better off to start with that and see where the overlap is. And if there's times where a parent's available and the other one's not, maybe that could default to that parent's time, and that might shape out a certain shape of a schedule, of a certain pattern that is different and than other people's, but is tailor fit for your life. And then that's a good place to be. That's a good place to consider. So the schedules are, while not the most important thing, they can be instrumental in getting a natural rhythm between your life and the parenting plan instead of an arbitrary one that is awkward and forced. And so looking at schedules is helpful. The other thing is exchanges. So thinking about the number of exchanges and how the exchanges take place. I actually have done a fair amount of post-decree mediation work on exchanges because the mediator who wrote those agreements didn't get into the specifics of who's actually doing the driving. And maybe when you're 2 miles apart, that doesn't matter. But when you move 40 miles apart, suddenly it's a big issue. But that was never considered. And so we have a problem. And so we need to, or I always strive to, assign that responsibility as a part of the parenting plan. So on the exchanges, is the party whose time ending, do they drop off? And then the other party whose time is beginning, do they pick up? So you can do, and that way you're going to be sharing the responsibility of the travel for the exchanges, equally, because, whenever your time ends, you're dropping off, or if your time's beginning, you go pick up. And so that becomes more stable and more, there's more specificity there in the plan. So if you ever disagree on who's picking up the kids, you can say, let's just revert to the plan, and the plan's going to guide you toward an answer. And so that's helpful. Thinking about little things like a lot of people come in saying, well, let's just exchange at school. So Monday mornings I'll drop off, or Monday afternoons I'll pick up, or Friday afternoons I'll pick up, and we'll exchange through the school. This is actually a valid approach for younger children, or if the parents are in high conflict, or the kids have strong separation anxiety. It may be difficult to see, from a kid's perspective, to see mom and dad arguing at an exchange, because then they can feel impacted by that. Or if seeing leaving mom's car and getting into dad's car or whatever is just too present for that child, and that's just tough, then doing the exchange at school can soften the blow a little bit, so mom can drop off. There's just that interaction, and then hours later dad picks up. That's different, and it doesn't feel like you've been exchanged, right? So that's something. Or if you're high conflict, you can avoid the parents interacting negatively at the exchange by doing it that way. But then you have to account for the logistics of things like, if the kid's in hockey, you've got to carry this hockey bag to school in the morning and navigate that all day, and then take it with you because you'll be going to the other parent's home that night. And did you forget your homework? Did you forget your phone charger? Did you forget the coat because the weather's changing this week? That kind of thing. And so those can be problematic for that perspective. And also, if you can get away with it, I find, at least in my experience, Sunday night being, prior to dinner being an excellent time for an exchange, because you've had all weekend, so you're ending on a good note, and then you're coming to the other home right at dinner time. That's always a good time for kids. And it allows you a built-in break between going from one parent to the other, because you have an activity where it redirects you both into something else. So like a good thing would be, like, let's say you exchange at 5 on Sunday, dinner's at 6. For that first hour, kid can just unwind and do whatever and sort of acclimate. Maybe they help out with dinner, that type of thing. Then you have dinner, and you can talk about what's coming up in the week, and it softens the transition quite a bit around a nice meal, and that could be a really good thing. And then the kids get organized, bath, showers, whatever, organized for the week, go to bed, wake up, hit the ground running fresh, and that's a good time to go. So those, how you do the exchanges can also matter, and thinking through those things and thinking about the gear that has to go back and forth. whether it should go through school or not. Some parents who live a long distance away or don't want to exchange at their homes can meet somewhere equidistant. So find a spot in the middle of your two homes. Maybe it's for some reason McDonald's has become the kid swapping place of choice for young kids. I think because you can grab a Happy Meal and play in the ball pit for a while. I don't know, but it seems to come up a lot in the work I do. But picking somewhere in the middle, and then that way you don't have to exchange at the homes. If that helps, then do it. But you got to be on time. Otherwise, that gets really frustrating. So you can do things like that and put that in the parenting plan. The other thing around exchanges is looking at everything's got a cost and an overhead. So thinking about kids' stages of development is another practical thing to consider in your parenting plan. So kids who are, obviously 6 months old are different than, 12 months or 2 years or 12 years or 17 years old. And so the parenting plan can change to adapt to the changing needs of those kids. And it may seem odd, like if you have a newborn who's 6 months old, to be thinking about things like driving privileges and firearm usage and birth control methods. It's like we're not even in that mindset yet. But the thing to consider is your parenting plan is going to live on, and it's going to be static while your kids grow. And so if you don't put those things in, then invariably your kids are going to grow into those activities, and you're going to have no language at all in the parenting plan. And so you want to make sure you think ahead and just do your best guess at what you're going to feel like about, those things, and then just take your best guess now. You can also implement the plan so that it changes on predefined milestones or events that you can actually quantifiably measure. And that might be like you have a 4-year-old and you'll do like a 2-2-3 plan now. And then at, a month before they enter into kindergarten, you switch to week on, week off. And so that can be put in there now. So plan A, plan B. And when you hit that milestone, you just switch to plan B, and you don't need to come to court. You don't need to come in to see me. It automatically phases when that milestone's hit. As long as the overnight count is the same, a 2-2-3 plan is 50-50, and week on, week off is 50-50. There's no arbitrary need to review child support. You just move into that new plan. And so you can do things like that. But understanding the developmental stages and needs of your child is paramount in creating a good parenting plan, or at least a good expectation with each other. And so here's another couple common things that I see that might be useful. When you have a newborn, let's say, most people tend to agree that the child should stay with mom. Let's say she might be breastfeeding. There's a lot of bonding that's taken place in the previous to the birth, and there's a lot of comfort there, and all that can be really good. And the thing to understand about that age group is that the kids can't obviously communicate through activities and language and all that. They really respond to the sound of your voice, the feeling of you holding them, your heartbeat, your warmth, and they develop a relationship with you and associate those things together. And one of the problems, one of the unfortunate things I see is in some parenting plans, hey, during that first year, mom has full parenting time. Dad has, no real time or access. He can come by once a week and, play with the kid or something. But the father's going to miss out on all that kinetic bonding, which is how the bonding takes place. And it can be a long lasting effect, with how the kid bonds in later life. And so, understanding that that's how your 6-month-old bonds, you might build a parenting plan that says, hey, for that first 12 months, mom will have the overnights, let's say, because of the logistics of feeding and all that. And then dad can come over every day, or at least every other day, even if it's just for a couple hours, to hold the baby and talk to it and get that kinetic bonding. In my own life, mom had, after the birth of our child, had a severe postpartum depression, and she refused to even pick up our daughter. And so I did all of that. I took care of all that stuff. And later, when My daughter would, let's say, take a spill and feel like she's hurt and come running into the arms of someone. She'd run right past her mother, right into my arms. And the reason that happened was because earlier, when she was 2 months old, 6 months old, it was me that was holding her. It was me that was changing her. And she just didn't build that kinetic relationship with mom the way she could have and should have. And so that can happen, and you need to not miss that tremendous opportunity in your parenting plan or in your parenting. So that's just one little thing. When you have a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old, their concept of time is different. So they can handle overnights, obviously they can handle, being away from the other parent and coming back, but their time is different. It's like you're gone for 2 days. Well, you're gone for 2 hours. You come back and they're like, hey, you've been gone forever. It's like, no, settle down. And so, understanding their time is different. The way they perceive time is different, and their needs are different. Having a frequent turnover or frequent exchange schedule might actually be helpful, because while it's not necessarily consistent, it's more dynamic. It provides for the child's need to have frequent contact and have that reassurance of both parents. And so that might be something that you do up until kindergarten, let's say. And then at that point, kids tend to do pretty good with like a week on, week off. And so then you move to that, and now it's, they're able to set up their week, execute their week, come back to you, have time. You can get into stuff better. The week executes better. And again, the whole point of the parenting plan is to, your objective there is to get kids to eventually be independent. And so by modeling, you can go away and come back, and I'm always going to be here for you, isn't the bad thing, right? You're trying to model, go out there, take a risk, and come back. I'm here for you. And because eventually when they're 18, let's say, that's going to be, go get them, right? And then come back if you need help. And they'll have trust in that because you've modeled that the entire time, and they're used to it. It won't feel so scary to them. I see a lot of parents who really want to have that contact, and it turns out to be more about what the parent wants. I don't want to be away from my kid for that long. And I'll hear parents actually word things when I say, what were you thinking in terms of parenting time? And someone will say, 2, 2, 3 for sure. And the other parent will say, I was thinking week on, week off. And that first parent will say, yeah, and I don't think so. I couldn't be away from her for that long. And it's clearly not about the kid. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about the kid's perspective on this. And so exchanges, if your kids adjust to things pretty quickly, then, I've seen teenagers do a 2-2-5 plan or 2-2-3 plan even. And those are kind of problematic as you get older. There's a lot more coordination. You have to be more on the collaborative side, highly communicative as parents if you're going to pull off a 2-2-3 plan with a teenager, because homework comes home on a Monday, it's due on a Wednesday. There's a parenting time exchange in the middle of that. So you're going to have to communicate with each other, and the kid's going to have to be good at organizing and things. The other thing is, if the kid takes some time to adjust, like let's say both parents have such different households that it takes a day or so for the kids to adjust to that new household, then you can, if you exchange them too soon, you don't get the benefit of the adjustment before you throw them back into another adjustment. So the kids are in a constant state of adjustment with like a 2-2-3 plan. And that can be really challenging to deal with. That happened to me. Our first approach to the plan was a 2-2-3 plan, and mom's house, dad's house was so different that it took the kids a day or two to adjust to the way that parent does things, and then they're back at the other house, and it takes them a day or two to adjust, and then just constantly always feeling like they're doing the wrong thing or have no real confidence in it. And so we moved to a week on, week off program even when they were 4, and it improved things dramatically because, we'd have a rougher Sunday night or Monday, and then the rest of the week was smooth. And we really got to enjoy that and get the benefit of that adjustment that way. And the kids had more of a chance to live and do things, harmoniously instead of worrying about these, 2-3 exchanges every week. So, the way you do the exchanges and the quantity of them, all that is important. And you can do some thinking about that before you come into the mediation, not having everything figured out, but just having some understanding about, thinking about those things. So when we get to talking about it, we can probably get to a better plan quicker. And so holidays are another big one that comes up. Thinking about how you want to celebrate. And when you get into the mediation, typically holidays are going to be specific days that have a specific, hopefully, a specific day and time that the holiday starts and when it ends. A lot of people just say Easter, odd and even years, where parents will split it, but they don't put a time in. And that can start to be a real problem because, if you want to do Sunday service or do, Easter egg hunt in the morning, but the other parent doesn't drop them off until 10, then, suddenly the time matters. And it's better just to pre-agree on that time. And in fact, why not make it Saturday night at 6? We'll have dinner, we'll go to bed, we'll wake up early, do the Easter egg hunt, or go to the service, or do whatever we're going to do. So having the time in there is really important. So pre-thinking through what holidays are important to you, or more importantly, what holidays are important to your children is good. And then those days are going to be the ones that you follow regardless of whose Sunday it normally is. Whoever has that Easter will get them for that odd or even year, let's say. And you can make up a holiday. Super Bowl Sunday can be a holiday. Achievement Day can be your holiday. You can, put in a weekly. You can put in a week in the summer as returning to home as a holiday. So these are going to override the regular parenting time schedule, and they're going to be guaranteed to you. And so that's why the holidays are important to assign and define in a clear way. While holidays tend to be really important for parents, they tend to be, in the long run, less important to children. I recently did a podcast where I interviewed 4 adult children from divorce, and I asked them, I said, what's one thing that your parents thought was really important that you could care less about or had wished that they hadn't put so much emphasis on? And all 4 of them at the same time said holidays. And so, and their feedback, which is the feedback of, I think, most kids, they don't really care who gets Christmas or Christmas Eve. They don't really care to hear about, well, your dad's getting that, so I need this, or, those kinds of things. They don't really care that you celebrate the holiday on the actual day. What they want is time with that parent. And if you celebrate Christmas on December 2nd for some reason, then do it. That's fine. The important thing is what happens. It's the quality of that time, not the quantity, not when it is. And so that is just something to consider while you're coming up with your holidays. And that might help you with that. Routines are good from the kids' perspective as well. So thinking about things from the kids' perspective, like I said, exchanging at school or exchanging after school or at home. How's that from the kids' perspective? And you can do things too, like after school, having a routine where they have a half hour of complete goof off time, and maybe they can have a snack during that time. And then they do, homework for a half hour, an hour, or whatever it is you want to do. And then they have some chores to do, and then they can have free time until dinner or whatever it is for your household. If you both feel that this is a good plan and one that you organically agree on, I say take advantage of all those things that are similar in both homes and formalize that into what we call a continuity plan. And this could be the same thing. If kids come home from your house or my house, then this is what they're going to do: the half hour, the homework, the chore, and then free time until dinner. And then the kid, no matter which home they're in, has this, this similar structure in mind. And those kind of things I do believe are a benefit. Where they're naturally going to be appreciated by both parents. If you want to try to force a continuity plan, you're generally not going to find much luck in that. So again, the benefit of trying to have the plan you want in the other person's house is going to be overshadowed by the conflict it creates, and it's going to create a net, negative. So, but I say where you do have an organic alignment in those different types of activities and routines, capitalize on them and take the time to put those forth as plans. We both do, and communicate that to kids and to each other, and that I do believe that helps. So continuity plans are something that you can implement as well and think about. The other thing is to not over prepare. I would say don't come in with a defined, detailed plan of everything that you've agreed to on your own, because as I think we've tried to illuminate during this whole process here, there's a lot that you don't know about. And you may base your entire plan on the wrong assumption of what it is in a kid's best need, interest, or what their priorities are. And so if you get overly invested in something, it can also be a negotiation tactic to say, I formalized the whole plan, here you go. And it seems to make it more real, less of a joint product, and more of a something that's defensible because it's real, it's materialized in the world, and it's harder to change now versus a conversation. And so I don't really like those. I like you to do about 75% of the research, and then come in and we'll close the gap on the 25%. So I'm always going to tell parents, as long as you're agreeing and it's productive, talk and explore everything you can. That's best. But try to resist finalizing and formalizing the agreement. I've had people come in with their 15-page parenting plan, and it's actually taken a lot longer to create the parenting plan because I got to go through that with them and say, did you really mean this here? And then they'll say, well, no, I didn't realize that's what that meant. And then now we've got 15 more pages of that, versus just saying, here's where I generally feel about these things. Here's what I think about the schedules, the activities, the decisions. And then I can close the gap with you. And you get the benefit of the mediator's experience if they have it in that area. And you're still not locked in. So your decision on those topics can be a little bit flexible to bring it to close, versus feeling like you're backtracking, which is also a problem of pre-agreeing to too much. You can come in and invariably, if you change your mind about something because you're getting new information in mediation, someone can say, we've already agreed to this. What are we doing? We're going backwards here. This isn't productive. And so that can be a risk. That's why I say don't over prepare. Do a quick emotional assessment too of yourself. Where are you at in the grief cycle with everything? Are you still in bargaining and denial? Do you feel like you're at acceptance? Do you really feel like you're at acceptance? Do you know you can't possibly be at acceptance right now if you're going through the divorce? It hasn't happened yet, right? You don't have your final decree. There's levels to acceptance. And are you being honest with yourself at what level you're at right now? So just really being aware of your kid's emotional assessment, your co-parent, your spouse, yourself, is really important to thinking about things, because the emotional side is going to be your, the non-logical side. And so if you're thinking like all your wishes are, well, I'm a better parent, or I'm going to miss my kids, or I can't be away from them that long, I think you should really assess that emotionally, like, because or if the other person says things that get you upset, or if we start talking about a parenting thing other than 50-50, are you getting upset? We really need to do have a real strong sense of your emotional basis for that, and understanding where that's coming from, because we need to factor the reality of that into either addressing a concern that's valid, or resetting expectations for what is in kids' best interest, which might cause you to have the adjustment. And so having a real strong sense of that is also helpful. And then consulting with your mediator ahead of time is a good idea, just to kind of vet some things out and say, this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about. What do you think about that? And get some feedback on the kinds of decisions that you're proposing. Do they seem emotional? Do they seem like they're focused on your own personal needs, not your kids? Are they flexible? Like, is it based around values, or is it based around the rigidity of certain schedules and certain restrictions around certain topics? Is it creating kind of a my way or the highway approach, or have you properly identified the net result you want? You say, I'm flexible on how we get there, as long as this is the direction we're heading. And so, or is it realistic? I just finished a conversation fairly recently with someone who was a client of mine, and when we came up with the plan, there was a strong sense that we're a collaborative, cooperative parenting approach. And then that was all signs led to that during the process. And then after the final decree came through, things fell apart. And it turns out the other person wasn't really into that like they said they were. They started to have resentments, and they started talking about, hey, you're making all the decisions. I never really like that. And they're doing things differently, but they've built this expectation together that they're going to work together. And it turns out that the person who believed that was not really being honest with themselves, and basically was trying to say, this is where I want us to be. I want us to race across that finish line before any other parents and have this standard. And it really wasn't based on what are we capable of doing. And so when the standard became difficult to hit, the other parent was exposed, and they only agreed to that because, again, the other parent was so overbearing and this is the way we need to be, and they were just trying to accommodate them. And now, turns out what we should have done was be honest, have that emotional assessment, consulted, and then try to build the plan from the bottom up. And what are you capable of? There's your parenting plan. That's your three-legged race. And then everything else, you need to have a strategy for how to achieve that independently, because that's not something you're able to pragmatically coordinate it with. And so, it's a real thing to be able to assess and do. So, okay. Anyway, a lot of this is not specific. Here are the different types of parenting plans to choose from and that kind of thing. It's more about, deeper concepts that could be applied and things to think about to help you get to a parenting plan and a co-parenting style and relationship that is going to be more productive and protect kids. So I hope it was valuable, and that it helps you have a proper mindset for how to come in and be prepared, and you have a good idea of what's going to be discussed, and you have some thoughts on how to prepare. And so I hope that is helpful in that regard, because it's one of the things that it's many of these topics are not discussed at all, frankly. And so hopefully that will be useful to you. And if nothing else, just make some time with a mediator beforehand to kind of go over things and get that pre-mediation coaching or education before you come in. All right, so that's it for that topic. So next episode, mediation is not just for people who have low to medium conflict. If working together isn't possible, and then you'll want to know all about shuttle mediation and how you can still get all the benefits of mediation, even when the situation is unfriendly. This has been Tom Davis. Thank you for joining me today. Remember to protect every accomplishment you make together, and that setbacks are just wins in the making. Stay positive. The Pro Se Divorce Podcast is a production of Family Synergy Mediation. The information in these podcasts are opinions only and should not be considered legal advice. Visit myfamilymediation.com to learn more.